Awesome. All right. So, good morning, everybody. So, I'm William Talbot, and we are at La Quinta High School. So, my presentation is about authentic assessment in the world language classroom. So, today we're going to be talking about a few different things. What is authentic assessment? Why should we use authentic assessments? How does authentic assessment relate to the International Baccalaureate IB exam? And then finally, how do we implement authentic assessments in the world language classroom? So, first things first, I want you to ask yourself, just take a few seconds, ask yourself these two questions. What do we want students to be able to do, and how will we know that they can do it? Take 15 seconds, ask yourself silently, and the moment you have an answer to both questions, I want you to raise your hand. What do we want students to be able to do, and how will we know that they can do it? Maria?
So we want the students to acquire the knowledge and information that we are giving them, and so they can assimilate and apply that in the real life.
In real life, I like that. Monica?
Same, something that's authentic and if they can actually apply it.
Perfect. So yeah, so I like that. Authentic, real life, that gets to the heart of what we are talking about today with authentic assessment. So first things first, what is authentic assessment? Take a moment, read this quote. This quote is by Grant P. Wiggins. He kind of is the father of authentic assessment. He was the one who started writing about this stuff back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. What really stands out to me about this quote is where he says, replicas of or analogous to the kinds of problems faced by adult citizens and consumers or professionals. So authentic assessment, we are trying to reflect what happens in the real world. So for us, for language, that would be how is the language used in the real world. That's what we're trying to reflect through authentic assessments and through authentic lessons. Now I have a video. This is of a classroom, of a math classroom, where the teacher is using a lot of authentic assessments and authentic lesson plans. I know this is math, this isn't language, but I want you to pay attention to the kinds of things he is doing and see how does that relate to the real world, and maybe ask yourself if in language we could do things that are similar. Let's take a moment. This is about 3 minutes, this video. Not working, let's see. I also have it up here.
To not take the calculator out of the room, think I need to use my calculator, and then leave it on the stairs, and then I cry when I'm like, where's the calculator?
Ben is a math teacher. He immediately made the impression on me that he was funny and that he was eager to teach kids and that he really liked his job. He wants you to really reach and get better at math.
My name is Benjamin Mook. I'm a math teacher at the School of the Future. I teach the 7th and 8th grade math cycle. What I'd say is an authentic assessment would be something that a teacher could design to hit the skills and the needs of their population. Some of the things that I'm assessing are not necessarily that kids can get to a right answer, but that kids, once they have that right answer, can understand, I got to this right answer because I followed these steps. I'll just pose questions and try to figure out what common mistakes are. And when I can get a whole mess of like 10 or 15 mistakes that it doesn't even matter who made them. Like I could have a kid that's an A student that has like an error in logic on how to do a certain type of problem. And then I can use that and pose that as a question to students later. So I'll take a mistake that they'll make, and then 1 or 2 days later, I'll throw it back into the class. Well, what I want you to do is this. Based on the information on this sheet, here you go. One of my more favorite types of assessment is to actually give them incorrect work or incorrect answers and have them break down the error in the thought process of how could a student who's not as well educated as you, or throw it out like that, like you would never make this mistake, but somebody did, and how would this mistake happen, and how could you, as a classmate or a tutor, remediate this mistake? Today, they were applying the slope formula to a set of stairs and seeing if they were in compliance with New York City building codes. okay, this is the math, this side of the math connects to the real life, and that was my goal.
I really like that we get to use our hands in class and that we really get to experience this in a real life situation, and that it's not just here's the formula, it's like here's why the formula works, and here's something to prove it, or here's how you could think about it.
Things that I'm doing now, I've designed so that during a class period, the student is working and I am able to walk around and kind of coach them through what they are doing. And so I can look and anticipate the problems they're having. So in the classroom, I'm spending a lot less energy. Like I end the school day now not tired.
When we talk about authentic assessment, obviously things can only be as authentic within the four walls of a school. So we want the tasks that they do to challenge them to synthesize things and to approach problems in the way that a scientist does, or a historian does, or a reader does, or a writer does, and to make those tasks and those challenges as authentic as possible.
And 5 minutes from now, we can get back to each other.
I think not only Ben, but the rest of the teachers at SOF and at the school, they really do want you to think about it, and their main goal is not to get you to the right answer, but to show how you got there and show that you've really put effort into what you were thinking.
The thing that I find the most important is that I'm not assessing my kids to be able to give them a B, C, or D. Like that's not going to help my kids. I can say that the best use of assessment is to figure out where they're at and how I can get them to where I want them to be.
So, somebody share out, what was either an example of authentic assessment that you saw in the video, or what was one of the things about authentic assessment that you might have learned from the video?
You have to make the content meaningful to you, so you can be able to use it to express yourself and communicate and reach others.
Perfect, right? It's about expressing yourself, it's about making it meaningful. Is there anything else? What was a good example of that? You had a really good example in that class. Did anybody catch it?
The stairs, being in compliance with the city.
Yeah, so the stairs, right? They were using that to see if they were in compliance. This school was in New York, so they connected it to New York building codes. So they made it very relevant, they made it very local, they made it very meaningful. That's what authentic assessment is all about. Now the video is working. So there's a lot of text on this slide. Obviously, we're not going to read all of it, but the number one thing to take from it is that traditional assessment, that's your multiple choice. That's your fill in the blank. That's your yes or no answer. Authentic assessment shifts the discussion from the what to the how. And it also shifts the discussion from these inauthentic forms of assessment. How do I fill in a blank space with the right form of a verb? What word from the vocab do I fill in the space with? And it shifts it to a different kind of assessment. For example, can students create a blog about their school in the target language? Can students create a brochure advertising something? Can students write an email? Can students write a letter? This stuff is very important because not only does that give more opportunities for creativity, not only does that better assess students on their knowledge, but as we'll see in a moment, it's also very closely related to the International Baccalaureate IB test. So, a little bit on the why of authentic assessment. As we already mentioned, authentic assessment is more authentic, it's more real world, it's more creative. What I thought was particularly interesting was when I was doing research, I found a lot of research showing that with language learners, authentic assessment not only improves mastery of the language, it also boosts confidence. So there's a lot of good benefits to authentic assessment. So, how do we implement authentic assessment? First things first, you need to start with the what. Going back to that question at the beginning of the presentation, what do we want students to be able to do? What do we want them to know? After that, we have to set standards. What are our standards for them to prove what they know? Authentic tasks. This one's probably the most important. Creating tasks that are related to the real world. Related to things that people in the real world are doing. Finally, we establish rubrics, and then we adjust instruction. A lot of us already do this in our classrooms. However, it's worth reiterating these things and restating these things. These are some examples of authentic assessments in the world language classroom: writing emails, making posters, brochures, presentations, modeling conversations, journal writing, debates, designing websites. A lot of us do voice recordings in our classrooms in order to simulate either a conversation or a presentation. These are all examples of authentic assessment. And for us at La Quinta High School, these are particularly important because we are an IB school, and our goal is for all of our students to eventually reach IB and succeed on the IB exam. These are the types of texts on the writing section of the external assessment of the IB exam. Blogs, emails, personal letters, surveys, instructions. It could be a pamphlet, an interview. There's all kinds of things, even a poster. As such, there is no fill in the blank. There is no multiple choice. It is important that our assessments remain authentic because this is ultimately what they're going to see. So I have a few resources. I've already sent you guys this presentation. At this point, I think my presentation might be running a little bit long. So,
You're at 11 minutes.
okay. So at this point, I've already sent you guys this presentation. I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to review this on your own time. In particular, I recommend this first link because he has a lot of authentic lessons in world language. So he actually has lesson plans for Spanish, French, and Latin. I know we don't have Latin here, but we do have Spanish and French. And then finally, the follow-up. In a moment, I'm going to pass out to you guys an authentic lesson plan template. Our goal, our follow-up goal for next week is I want everybody to come up with an authentic lesson plan. You can take a lesson you already have and make it authentic. You can use one of the example ones in the resources, but ultimately our goal is to have that, and then throughout the year we're going to go over some of these more advanced strategies of doing authentic assessment. So with that, once again, my name is William Talbot from La Quinta High School. I appreciate you all for attending. I appreciate all your participation, and I hope that this presentation was beneficial to you. In a moment, I'm going to send out a satisfaction survey. I'd appreciate it if everybody could complete that. Thank you.
Thank you.